Okay, this seminar is really designed to be quite a practical guide to how you can use PR within your own businesses or organisations to hopefully raise your profile and increase your bottom line. But because there's quite a small group of us today, it's quite nice if we can make it more interactive. So if anybody's got any ideas or contributions they want to make, feel free to do so. My name's Kate, I'm from Shooting Star Public Relations, and I'm going to talk to you about how you can promote your business or organisation through the media. So first we'll have a look at what we're going to talk about today, so you know what we're going to cover in this session. We're going to have a look at what PR actually is, definitions of PR and what it really consists of. What makes a good news story, because that is essential when you're thinking about promoting your business through the media. You need to know what is newsworthy, what within your organisation or business might make a good story or interest a journalist. How you can use PR to promote your business through the media. When you think about PR, we're all engaged in it already, because PR is when you talk to your existing customers or talk to new people who might be potential customers or stakeholders, or whether you're telling people about your business down the pub or whatever it might be. That all constitutes as PR, so you can't really choose whether to engage in it or not, because we're already actively doing it. How to write a news release. We'll have a look at the basics of writing a news release. Social media, we'll skim briefly over. I know you've already heard from David Slight and Sean Lawson about social media, but we'll have another look at that, because these days that is an integral part of public relations, how you engage with your customers or potential customers. How to handle negative publicity, and that kind of goes hand in hand with social media, because we often get people saying to us that they're frightened about engaging with people on social media because they're worried that they might get negative feedback. But we'll look at ways of kind of dealing with that and how you can perhaps turn a negative into a positive. And the power of photography. I'm always telling clients it's really important to have a good bank of high quality, high resolution images, so that no matter whether you're engaging in PR, you're trying to pitch a story to a journalist, if you've got a good photograph to go alongside that story, that can make it more powerful and more interesting and get you more column inches. But it might be that you're going to develop a new website, or you're having a new brochure done, or you're thinking of sending out a newsletter, and having that bank of photographs is a really useful resource. So there are lots of different definitions about what constitutes PR and what PR actually is, but this is the Chartered Institute of PR's definition. And they say that public relations is all about reputation. It's about what you do, what you say, and more importantly, what others say and think about you. So when you're thinking about buying a car, for instance, it's thinking about what sways your decision, what makes you prefer a Volvo to a Fiat. It might be that you are leaning towards buying a Volvo because they have a reputation for being one of the safest cars on the market. Whether that is actually true or not, if you did the research, you could find out, but that's the perceived perception, and that might influence someone's buying behaviour. It's based on their reputation. Reputations take a long time to build up, but they can take minutes to destroy, unfortunately. So we find that PR is most effective when you're trying to promote understanding about your business or organisation, and trying to get people, your target market, to understand exactly what you do or what you offer. Because that is one of the biggest barriers to doing business, that if people don't understand what it is you do, or what makes you different from your competitors, why they should use you or buy your product or service, then you'll struggle to be successful. And it's about establishing and maintaining goodwill and feelings of generosity and kindness towards your business from your target market. So, for instance, you know what Ran Farm Park is, you've read about them, you've heard about them on the radio, you've visited their website, you follow them on Twitter, you feel like you've got a good understanding of what exactly they offer and what they do. And because of their reputation, and because you've seen journalists writing about them and giving them good reviews, and you've heard good reports from other people that have been there, you've heard it's a really good family day out, you feel warm feelings towards them. And next time that you're on holiday, it's swayed your decision because you've read so much and heard so many good things about them that you're actually going to go there next time the children are on holiday, and not only that, you're going to recommend them to your friends and family. PR can help you to raise your profile. So again, getting people to realise that you exist. You might have a really great offering, but if people don't know that what you do or that you're out there, you know, you're really going to struggle to attract business. It's about telling people your story, and that's what we heard Jonathan talking about earlier. It's about identifying stories within your organisation or even within the people that work for your organisation and trying to get those stories out there regardless of what medium it is. Whether you're hoping to get on Look North, you know, you're interested in pitching your story to Look North and hoping that they'll cover it, or whether you're going to blog about your organisation or business yourself and you're wanting to get your story across that way, or you're going to use social media to do it. It's about finding a story that will be of interest and relevance to other people. And it's about protecting your brand, so it's about keeping an eye, keeping an ear out about what people are saying about your business or organisation or people that work in it. You know, keeping an eye on Facebook and Twitter and on the internet and reading the papers to find out if there are any reports of your business or what people are saying about you. They could be having conversations and you don't know about it, but if you actively engage, you know, there's ways of finding out. For instance, if you're on Twitter, you can quite easily monitor what people are saying to you, about you to a certain degree, by going on using a platform called TweetDeck. If you register on there, you can put in the search box different search terms, so it might be your organisation name, and it'll bring up tweets including that search term. You know, and keep reading the newspapers, keep reading your local papers, finding out if Food Monster's done a review on you or whatever it might be. Also, you can set up Google News alerts, so you can put in your business name into Google. There's a news alert service. If you put in your key organisation names, maybe your own name, director's name, whatever it might be, every time that is mentioned in a news story, it will bring it up so you can monitor what's being said about your brand in the media. And obviously, if it's a negative story, you can do something to address it. But if you don't know what's being said about you in the first place, it's hard to be able to refute any false information that might be out there about you. And of course, PR ultimately is to try and help increase your bottom line, hopefully by raising your profile, making you stand out head and shoulders above your competition, by selling people this fantastic story about yourselves, by protecting your brand and making people feel good about you. It's going to encourage existing customers to come back and use you again and attract new customers, new partners, suppliers, whatever it might be. So we get a lot of people saying to us, especially at the minute with the tough economic climate, we've only got a small budget, you know, how can we engage in PR? And what we always say to people, PR is very cost effective, and there are things that you can do yourselves, but it just takes a bit of time and effort, or a lot of time in some cases. And one of the staple activities of any sort of PR campaign or any PR practitioner is building relationships with journalists or bloggers or people that you want to talk about you or write about you. So a good way of doing that is like with any relationship, you know, you need to keep in regular contact with these people. And when you do have a good story to tell, you know, if you particularly do want to get on a particular station or in a particular paper or magazine, you know, you might approach them and offer them an exclusive. And then if they say, no, we're not interested, then you can go to the next person on your list. So it's about thinking about, you know, how you can keep in regular contact with them, and that might even be through following them on Twitter, trying to engage in a conversation with them, seeing what they've tweeted about previously, and trying to, you know, offer them something similar of interest. If I'm, for instance, we took on a new client recently and they'd designed a new range of luxury hen houses. So the sorts of journalists I'm looking to approach are people that write about what I'm trying to pitch to them. So it might be Woman and Home magazine, it might be Country Living, it might be Country Life, it might be Lincolnshire Life, it might be Yorkshire Post, you know, depending on the locality. And then I might choose to follow the journalists that I'm trying to pitch to on Twitter and find out what they're interested in. If I spot that they've got chickens, you know, they're talking about chicken welfare, I might say, oh, have you seen this? It's a great new chicken coop you know, something different on the market. It's unique because X, Y, and Z. And if you do get to talk to a journalist, you know, and you get them interested in your story, and then they say, great, we'll come and interview you. Then if you say, oh no, I don't want to be on TV, or oh no, you know, don't get me in the picture, that's not being useful to a journalist, so that'll quickly annoy them. So always try and be useful, helpful, responsive, quick to respond. If you say to them, oh, I can't do it this week, I'll have to talk to you next week, that's no good because old news is no news. Also, news releases, we'll come on to that in a minute, but news releases are a really important, really useful vehicle of getting your message out there. Journalists are used to receiving hundreds of news releases every day, so you need to try and make yours stand out. You know, you need to get your story in the top couple of lines. Journalists are very time poor, so if you don't get your story succinctly across in the first few paragraphs, chances are your press release is going to end up in the bin. So we'll come on to how to write an effective news release in a moment. Features can be a bit of a longer news story, and they don't have to be quite as news driven. So for instance, if you were a hotel, you could write a feature on how to plan the perfect wedding. If you were a restaurant, you might get your chef to write a feature, or you can pitch a feature to a magazine, journalist or website, whatever it might be, on how to plan the perfect Christmas dinner. You know, it doesn't have to be quite as news-led, but there does need to be a human interest angle. It needs to be something that's going to be interesting to people. So when I'm trying to pitch these chicken coops, for instance, I can offer Penny to talk about, she's a female entrepreneur, she's set up a new business. I could get her to write a feature about how to start up a new business or how to take a new product to market. It doesn't directly have to be about the hen houses, but it's bringing it back to that at the end of the day. You know, it's a human interest feature, but at the end of the day, we're trying to promote these new luxury hen houses. It might be a feature on chicken welfare or rescuing battery hens. So it can be something around your field of interest that you could offer to write about, or if you don't feel comfortable writing it yourself, just pitch the idea to journalists. I mean, journalists, there's thousands of magazines out there, whether it be a consumer magazine or whether it be specific to your trade, so a trade magazine. You know, journalists are looking for new and interesting material all the time. So don't be afraid of picking up the phone and talking to them and selling them your ideas. You know, at the end of the day, people are really sceptical about journalists and always think they have alternative motives, but they're humans just like you and I. You know, and if you can have a chat to someone and find a common ground that you can perhaps work from, you know you've got common interests because you've read the website and you know they've written about restaurants in the past, and you're a restaurant, you've got this great new menu out. You know, you have something in common that you can talk to them about, and you've done your research, and it's flattering if someone rings you up and says, well, yeah, I read your article you wrote last week about XYZ, and I thought you might also be interested in this. So it's rather than taking a scattergun approach and trying to sell your story to everybody, try and find those niche people who are interested in writing about what you've got to say. It could be trying to organise a press trip. So if you're running a tourist attraction, or you've got a hotel or restaurant, whatever it might be, you know, it's great to be able to ring a journalist and say, would you like to come down for the day? Would you like to bring your family, and would you like to write a review about it? And of course, it could be any journalist from within your sort of catchment area. So think about who your target market is. If your visitors, for instance, tend to come from within a 3-hour radius of where you're based, then you might want to ring up the Manchester Evening News, you know, and find out who the travel editor is, who the feature writer is, who the restaurant critic is, and invite them to come along, you know, try you out for free. And while they're here, you know, you might consider working with another partner on this. So if you're a restaurant, you might consider working with a hotel and say, look, I've got this journalist coming from the Manchester Evening News, could you give them a free overnight stay? So you're kind of adding value to their visit. You might arrange a free tour at the cathedral, and if the cathedral think that they're going to get some free publicity out of it, and it's going to be in a review in the Manchester Evening News, then chances are they'll be more than happy to work with you on that. It's about presenting yourself as an expert speaker in your field. So keeping an eye on what's being talked about in the local and national news, and offering to give an opinion or be an expert speaker about that. So for instance, if there was a local news article that tourism has increased by 25% and you work within the tourism industry, you could give whichever journalist it was writing about that story or talking about that story, give them a ring and say, I've had a similar experience, we've seen an increase in tourists to our venue, I can talk to you about that, give you an interesting comment and give you my opinion on that. And if you regularly do that, if you try and build up relationships with these journalists, they'll come back to you time and time again if they know that they can rely on you for a quick and an authoritative and interesting comment. Social media, that is cheap to do in the fact that it's free, but it's time consuming, so it's costly in kind of man hours, but it can be very effective if you put the effort in. Photographs, we've already mentioned the power of photography, and always think about setting up photograph opportunities. Some journalists or media outlets don't like to use other people's photographs, they like to come and take their own. So if you give them a time and a day when they can come, or give them a ring and say, when would you like to come, to take a photograph of our new, whatever it might be, we can organise and set that up for you and make sure the relevant people are all available and give you something nice to film or something nice to photograph. Think about the medium that you're trying to target. So if it is TV, they will need something interesting to film. If it is newspapers, they'll need someone interesting to talk to. The images perhaps aren't as important for them, although they might want to send a photographer. So what exactly is news? It's got to be new. It's got to be interesting. You might think it's really interesting to you within your business, but it might not be of interest to anyone else. And you can kind of test that by talking to your friends and other people and finding out if they think it's interesting. Something unusual, so something out of the ordinary. I saw a story recently that appeared on Calendar, and it was, the basic crux of the story was that Nottinghamshire County Council had changed their phone number, which sounds really boring, but they'd sold it along the lines of the unusual calls that the council customer service centre receives from people. So it might be they're getting the key message across that they're changing their phone number, and they deal with thousands of calls a day, and they give people great customer service, and there's all these important things that they help people with. But the main angle of the story was all the weird and wonderful calls that they actually receive. So it might be, I think that one of them was someone ringing up and asking if they could walk their donkey along the pavement. These really unusual calls that they get, and that makes the news story, but they've still managed to get the information across, but it's the way that they've angled it that's made it interesting. The first, the last, the lowest, the highest, the biggest, the best. We've seen in Jonathan's talk, he was talking about in Texas they had the biggest pecan in the world or something like that. It always makes a good story. You've had the highest number of visitors, whatever it might be. Make sure it's relevant to your target audience. And timely. If you've got a new chef, for instance, at your restaurant, or you're launching a new menu, it's no good if you launched it 2 months ago. It's got to be when it's happening. If you're opening a new room or a new extension at your venue, it's got to be when it's finished, when the paint's just dry. It's no good 6 months down the line, because that's old news. So what might make a good news story? So it might be that you're taking on new staff, and that is quite unusual and out of the ordinary these days with the current state of the economy. There's a lot of people making staff redundant, so actually creating more jobs in your local economy or your local community can make a good news story. It might be that you're launching a new product or service. It might be expansion plans, so you're building a new, building a new spa or whatever it might be. Research findings, so you might have done some research amongst your target audience and found, say for instance, amongst your existing customers, that 98% of people were very satisfied or extremely satisfied with your product or service. That might make a good news story. Staff successes, so if your staff have won any awards or gained any new qualifications, that all helps to build a reputation up about your business, that you're professional, you invest in your staff, you're doing well, you're a thriving business. Anniversaries or milestones, so it might be your 1000th customer. And sometimes it's not enough to say, yes, our 10-year anniversary, we've been open for 10 years. As we've seen recently with the BBC, they've celebrated 90 years of regional broadcasting, but they're not just saying, oh, it's 90 years since we put out our first regional radio broadcast, isn't that great? They're having a simultaneous broadcast across all regional stations. You know, it's the first time that's ever happened. And that makes it more newsworthy, gives it a bit more of an angle. Or it could be sector news, so it could be that you've noticed something happening in the national news and you can localise it for your local media by giving your opinion or thoughts on it. We had a case, we were working for a farm attraction, and when foot and mouth was happening, you know, there were new rules about people visiting farm attractions, whether they could or couldn't pet the animals. You know, and that was an opportunity to get this particular attraction onto the radio, onto the TV, giving their opinion, and it localises a national story. It gives it a local angle. So unfortunately, what also makes a good news story are job losses, business failures, scandals, court cases. When you think about the national news bulletins, maybe news at 10, you know, 80% of it unfortunately tends to be bad news, and 20% is that and finally nice story at the end. But luckily with local news media, regional media, trade media, they don't tend to be looking for negative stories so much. They tend to be looking for good stories to tell, projects that are underway. You know, journalists aren't trying to trick you or trying to get a bad news story out of you, especially local journalists will be more than happy to cover your good news, but they'll also be more than happy to cover these sorts of things as well. So it's a double-edged sword. You can't really court positive attention and then not be prepared to talk to them when there's a negative story. So when we're thinking about news releases, it is a great tool for communicating with journalists. They're used to receiving news releases. We always say try and keep them down to sort of 2 sides of A4. Try and keep it clear, concise and factual, and make sure it's true. If you start saying things that are inaccurate or false, chances are you will get found out. Make sure it's newsworthy. So make sure it's not just a free advert for your business and it's not going to be of interest to anybody else. Make sure it's timely. Put the date on there. We see so many press releases without the date on. And if you send a press release out without the date on, the journalist doesn't know whether it's new or whether it's 3 months old or it's, you know, 6 weeks old and they're only just coming across it. Or you've been sending it out for 2 months previously and now you're just sending it to them. Make sure if you're organising an event, you put the date of the event on as well. Your contact details. Make sure you put the contact details on there. May seem obvious of someone who's going to be available. You know, if that person's going on holiday for a week after you send the press release out and the journalist rings and they can't get hold of anybody to talk to, that is going to be very annoying and chances are they won't come back to you in the future. And these days, contact details can be your phone number, your email address, your Twitter handle, your Facebook page, your website. You know, but make sure there are ways that people can easily get hold of you. And avoid hyperbole. So rather than in the main body of the press release putting how fantastic and wonderful and great and amazing what it is you're trying to promote is, try and keep factual information in the main body of the press release, so keep it objective, but put those comments and opinions in people's comments and quotes. So it might be a comment or a quote from you as the business owner, and in that comment or quote then you can say, yeah, this is a great new service and people are going to find it incredibly useful. And you can put a quote maybe from a customer or a testimonial from someone. Make sure you have their name. You know, it's not just a random person that you could have made up. You have the name of this customer who backs you up and says why this new product or service is great. Or somebody who's an authority in their field. We always think that if you cover the 5 W's, who, what, where, when, why, and maybe how, so 6 really, and it's not W, so it doesn't quite fit. Then you've got the basic bones of any story. You've basically covered the story and you've got all the relevant information in there. And that is what you learn as a journalist when you're training to be a journalist. It's the 5 W's of any story. When you've answered all those questions, you've got all that information in there, chances are you've covered the most important facts. And think about what your key messages are, what you actually want to say about your business and what you want to get across. and keep reiterating those throughout all your communications. So whether it's a press release, whether it's on your website, whether it's a newsletter, whether it's a brochure, whether it's on social media. And when I say key messages, I mean what makes you different from your competitors. You know, what are your key sort of selling points, really? It might be, coming back to Ram Farm Park again, it might be that we're a great family day out and we're great value for money. We're the only farm park within 2 hours from Lincolnshire or whatever. You know, we're the biggest, we're the best farm park, we've got the most animals, whatever it is. It's what makes you different from your competitors and what makes you stand out. When you think about writing a press release, we really say format it as kind of an upside down triangle of news. So you've got the most important, relevant and interesting information at the top of the triangle, and as you gradually go down towards the point, you've got the least interesting or relevant information towards the bottom. And we always say try and put like your first quote from your first people's opinions are always interesting, so try and put them sort of third or fourth paragraph down. And when I say paragraph, I mean really sentences. Make the headline short and snappy, keep it interesting, put your date at the top, the contact details. And then we find that journalists tend to only quickly glance at a press release. They might read the first couple of lines. If it's not of interesting or relevance or the information isn't at the top, they'll just put it in the bin. And to give your news release the best possible chance of success, research shows that 87% of journalists these days want news releases on email. It used to be that when I first worked as a journalist, we used to get press releases via the fax machine. Don't even have a fax machine now. Or via the post, but nowadays people are working on email. But journalists do receive hundreds of emails every day, so you need to try and make your news release stand out from all the rest. This is always a contentious issue for PR practitioners, whether to call journalists or whether you just end up annoying them because you're pestering them and chasing them and getting on their nerves. So sometimes it's a good idea to put a call in first to make sure you're not wasting your time, to find out if the person you're targeting your news release out or people are actually interested in your story in the first place. That's a great way of getting in contact with them first and start building that relationship. And then once you send the press release, before you ring up to say, we try not to say, did you get my press release? We try and say, do you want any more information? Do you want photographs? Do you want to arrange an interview? You know, try and provide a useful service. But actually read that newspaper, look at that website, read that blog, to have a look if they've already covered your story first. Because if you ring them up and say, oh, I sent you a news release, did you see it? Are you going to cover it? And they say, oh yeah, it was in the 6 o'clock news. Didn't you watch it? You know, don't you watch our news programme? You know, that could be really embarrassing and it makes you look bad. So try and do a bit of research first to find out if they have actually covered your story before you ring them. Don't clog up inboxes with massive files. So if you've got a photograph and it's like 10 megabytes, that's just going to either not get through at all because it'll just bounce back, or it's going to clog up someone's inbox so they can't receive any more emails. Either way, it's going to be rather annoying. So we'd say try and keep photographs down to sort of 1-2 meg, or maybe send them a low-res image for a start, quite a small image, and then say, you know, if you're interested, I can send you some high-res images, or in your phone call say, I sent you a low-res image, would you like a high-res version? And when I say high-res and low-res, really to reproduce well in print, a photograph needs to be sort of 310 dpi, and you can find that in the properties of your photograph, what the dpi is. If it's sort of less than 310, it's not going to reproduce very well in print. It's different for the web. It can be a lot smaller, but if you're targeting whether it's trade magazines or consumer magazines or newspapers, it needs to be a good quality photograph. Don't call on deadline. So if you are going to give them a ring, it might be worth just giving the general number a ring first, so talking to the receptionist and finding out what their deadline is. So you're not ringing the journalist and they're like right up against it, they've got 5 minutes to go before their deadline. So if you're thinking about the Echo, for instance, the paper comes out on a Thursday, you know, their deadline is kind of Wednesday lunchtime. That's right on deadline. So if you were going to ring them on a Wednesday and say, oh, did you get my press release? They might be like, I'm on deadline. Do you mean I haven't got time to talk to you about your press release? You know, you might want to even ring them on Friday, the week before, or Monday. You know, people do like to work in advance, and especially with magazines. If it's a monthly magazine, they tend to work sort of at least 8 weeks in advance. So make sure you're sending or calling the right person. So do some research beforehand and find out who's writing about what you're talking about. So if you ring a journalist and you're able to say to them, yeah, I know you're interested in this, that's why I sent you this press release. You know, that's really flattering that you've actually took your time to do your research and find out who the right person to contact is. And to be available for questions and interviews and photographs. You know, it's no good saying, oh, I didn't want to be in the picture, or I don't want to talk on the radio. You know, you need to be available and supply images, as we've said, that are not too small but not too big that they're going to clog up someone's email. So social media can seem a bit of a daunting prospect if you're not already active on there, but I would say it's better to do 1 or 2 things and do them well rather than try and spread yourself across all platforms. And it's about being selective and thinking about where your target market is likely to be. We always find Facebook does tend to be more sort of consumer-led. There's probably less businesses on Facebook. It tends to be more consumer to consumer or business to consumer. And it does tend to be a more younger audience. We find Twitter is a lot more business to business. A lot of my work colleagues and clients are on Twitter, but not that many of my friends are yet. But yeah, it does seem to be a good business tool. So think about if you're going to send something, for instance, to the local radio stations. If you're going to send it to Links FM, that's a much more younger target audience than Radio Lincolnshire. Radio Lincolnshire, you're looking at sort of 45 plus. Links FM is kind of 17 to 45. I mean, they're loose guidelines, but think about who your products or services are aimed at and try and target that relevant media. So don't just announce, try and engage with people and be social and get involved in conversations and give something back and be generous with your time. So it's not just about broadcasting what's great about yourselves, it's about taking an interest in other people. And it's like anything, basic conversation. If you go networking, face-to-face networking, and just talk about yourself constantly and don't ask any questions of anybody else you meet, you know, they're not going to want to do business with you and you're not going to build relationships up. And it's the same on social media. You know, try and engage with people, and you can search by topics by searching in keywords in the search box. You know, maybe hashtags, search for hashtags. Like if you're wanting to promote tourism in Lincoln, you might search under hashtag Lincoln and it will bring up other people who've been tweeting about the same hashtag or the same subject area. Be responsive, so it's no good going on there, think, well, I'll go on there every Friday and I won't go on any other time in the week, because people might have tried to engage in a conversation with you or posted some feedback or sent you a message, and if you're not going back there till a week or so later, you know, it makes you look like you haven't got your finger on the pulse really, you don't care about other people or their comments or their feedback. So make sure you're on there regularly, checking who's talking about you, who's messaged you, who's tried to interact with you, and make sure you respond. So yeah, it's about being interested in other people really, and we always find that if you do invest the time and effort, if you are prepared to spend that time and effort, you will get some reward in return. So how to handle negative publicity? This is always a tough question. But we always say these days, because there are so many communication tools available, you know, it's always best to be honest, sincere and open and try and be upfront. You know, it's no good sticking your head in the sand and hoping that it'll go away, this problem will go away. Because if someone writes something negative about you, tends to be it'll find its way onto social media and then other people will get involved and add to the comments. You know, you need to be tackling that problem head on. So, for instance, if a journalist came and gave you a review and it was a negative review and it appeared in the paper, you know, you might want to give them a call and say, you know, we've addressed that problem, there was an issue, we had a staff shortage, but we'd like to invite you back to try it again. You know, and if you are going to invite them back, make sure you really look after them. Hopefully you can find out when they're going to come. You know, and try and be committed to resolving the issue in whatever way you can, and then that will come across and it'll give people a good perception of you. And be prepared to say sorry if it is your fault. You know, don't try and shirk the blame. You know, once you've acknowledged there's a problem, you can move on and deal with it. And often it is all that people want is just an apology. You know, I've heard so many people say they didn't even apologise. You know, that's all they want, someone just to admit liability or apologise. Respond quickly and accurately, so don't try and guess what happened. Try and find out exactly what happened, who they spoke to, you know, who they saw, what the situation was, what the reasoning was behind it, and then respond as quickly and accurately as you can. Avoid the phrase no comment, because it looks like you have something to hide. And also, even if it's negative publicity, it's an opportunity to get your story across and tell your side of the story and refute any negative information or false information that people might be perpetuating about you. So always challenge information that you know to be wrong, but try and avoid getting into an argument, you know, try and keep it polite. And highlight the positive changes and updates that you've made. Say if it was a negative review on TripAdvisor, you know, if you're responsive and you give them a personal response and you say that might have been the case, but now we've changed the menu or we've got a new chef, whatever it is, make sure you make that clear that you've done something about it, that you've committed to resolving the issue. And take it offline if possible. So if it is a negative comment on Facebook or Twitter, we always say to clients, respond online, say thank you for your feedback, you know, we really appreciate your comments, but can you message us your contact details so I can get someone to call you straight away? You know, and you're taking the negative publicity offline and you're dealing with them face to face, and it does make you look like you're more taking responsibility. You know, you're willing to give them a call and have a chat to them on the phone, and it also avoids getting into a tit-for-tat argument online. And really, just to end on, just to try and hammer that message home, how important photographs are. A picture can tell 1,000 words, and just by looking at these images that I'm going to show you now, you know, we all know what this story was about. And if you've got a great offering, a great business, great team of staff, you know, it's great to be able to show that through an image rather than just trying to portray it through words. So who can tell me what that story is about? Yeah, that's right. Just from that image, we know what that story is about. And just seeing that massive field, if you like, of flowers, it just really hits home the sort of strength of feeling there was at the time of her death in perhaps words, the way words that, you know, would struggle to do, they couldn't convey that kind of strength of emotion that there was at the time. And this photograph is really an iconic image and really helped to bring about the end of the Vietnamese War. You know, it's such a striking photograph, and again, another iconic image when we were talking about the Dutch and Duchess of Cambridge, Duke and Duchess, sorry, getting married. People wanted to know what their dress was about, what her dress was like, and they wanted to see it for themselves. And how beautiful she looked, you know, that was part of the story, not just the fact that they were getting married. And we always say, advertising you pay for, PR, good PR you pray for. And that really is how good effective PR works, because people know that you've paid for an advert if you have an advert in a publication, whereas PR is a journalist or blogger choosing to write about you, choosing to give their third-party endorsement to your product or service. But as we had in the other seminar previously, you know, it takes a lot of time and effort. You can be sending out these good stories and nobody can pick them up. You know, nobody chooses to write about them or cover them. And that's where building relationships comes into it.